Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host. My name is Nathan Battishall. And today I want to bring you an episode talking about developing your principal place of residence or securing a new principal place of residence to develop. I'm seeing a real, probably since COVID really, like I've seen a real hunger in everyday Australians wanting to do a project or do some type of development project for all different various reasons. And we talk about it a lot on this podcast. I've seen this more than ever where you've got different reasons. You've got downsizers wanting to develop their backyard. You've got young couples wanting to get into the market, or you've got siblings wanting to do a development together to be able to obviously lower their debt, to put a little bit of equity into their property. For some people, it's the ability to get rid of a mortgage, to smash out a mortgage. For others, it's who may have already smashed out a mortgage, it's to get some more cash in their hand or some retirement money, all different reasons. But there's a lot of people I'm finding that are wanting to look at a site that has future potential or has a potential additional value that they can add, or value adding potential to that site. Now, some people already live on a property that has value adding potential. Other people have a property they currently own with the view they want to sell that property to buy a property that does have better value adding potential. And I think this is a really good starting point for a lot of people that want to dip their feet into doing projects, who want to dip their feet into doing a development or doing a small project, residential project. I just think it's a really smart and viable and excellent way to get into this space, because the reality is a lot of people either don't have the borrowing capacity, or they don't have the experience, or they don't have the confidence yet to execute a project or to execute a larger project. So the next best thing for someone to think about is, how can I secure a property that maybe has value-adding potential that others may not either see or realise? So I think this is a really great space, and we live in so many parts in New South Wales especially, where there is so many infill sites that just have potential oozing in those infilled areas all across different suburbs and cities and towns and regions. There's so many of these infill sites that you can develop additional dwellings or additional properties on to help develop your own little portfolio or to get yourself up. So I think the big key thing is, first and foremost, have a plan. Have a plan of what you're actually aiming to achieve in this. And I call this taking a step back to take a step forward. I see a lot of people, and it's interesting, I see a lot of young couples at times, and I used to be in that space where we design people's dream homes. It was a great space. I was in that for a long time, over a decade, and then just decided to fully niche down into projects, developments, investments, high-end developments as well, for guys wanting to do projects. But one thing I found, a lot of people were leveraging themselves up to their eyeballs in debt by having to have the dream house too early in the piece. And look, for some people, that's the goal, that's the plan, that's the vision. But look, most people, if you're listening to this podcast, and especially if you're an avid, regular listener, like we do have quite a number of people in that space now, you're generally listening to this, you're consuming this, and you're out there executing projects because you want to generate wealth through property. You want to develop maybe some quality of life through property. You want to develop some passive income. You may want to fully do this as a career and as a job, doing projects and developments. And then for other people, you just want to supplement your income. There's all different reasons why people do it. But a lot of people listening here, you don't want to be just sunk down and bogged down with a huge mortgage on a house that then gives you no leverage or opportunity to do any type of projects that can help increase your net worth and help increase your income. So for me, a lot of people listening will understand the importance at times in your life where you have to take a step back, to take a step forward. Now, when I say take a step back, for some people you'll view this as a step back, but for me, I see it as a step forward. But I call it taking a step back to take a step forward, because for some people, and we've got a lot of clients over the years that have done this, and I commend them on this. I commend they've been able to get their family on board with this, where we see, I've seen this so many times, and I reckon I've seen this dozens of times already in this first half of the year, where you get families that are quite comfortable. They might have a good chunk of a mortgage paid off on a really nice suburban house, beautiful house, what they might have thought was the forever house or the long-term house that might have seen their kids through school and then sending them off to uni or work. All of a sudden, life changes, priorities change, vision changes, goals change, and all of a sudden, having the McMansion or having the dream house maybe isn't so much the dream anymore. For some people, it's deciding, and I've seen lots of this, where they might have a good, like quite a reasonable amount of their mortgage paid off, maybe 3/4, but they decide, you know what? They go and educate themselves. They do some education. They start to get themselves into that space where they really want to delve into property, and they start to look at opportunities of, what if we got a site? What if we sold this property and did a development and kept a property, sold a property, cleared the debt, clear the mortgage, no pressure, no stress, able to really bank some more money. You've got the ability to obviously have a bit more financial freedom to be able to do the things that you love to do, or for some people, it's doing it again. And I've seen a lot of this where people make a decision that they're going to move out of the comfortable big house with a view to then do a project and live in. For example, a lot of times people do it with the duplex. They'll decide, you know what, different stages of life, sometimes younger couples or middle sort of 30s and early 40s couples with kids. Sometimes we'll say, you know what, we're going to go through a little bit of short-term pain. We're going to downsize from a full-size house. We're going to go into a duplex. And let's face it, a lot of duplexes these days are pretty much the size of a full-size house. My wife and I made that decision a few years ago. We decided we wanted to get ourselves in a position to do more projects and more developments. And we, obviously we've got kids. I've got 4 kids. My wife and I, we've got 4 kids, all in school, 2 in high school, 2 in primary school. And we decided that we're going to take a step back to make a step forward. So we went from living in houses to deciding to do a triplex development with the view that we'd sell the 2 best ones. So in our case, we did a triplex CDC. The idea was sell the 2 on the outside, then live in the middle one. The middle one's obviously the least profitable, but the idea is sell the 2 outside ones. They've got more natural light. Generally, your 2 outside ones sell for about the same price. But for us, the idea was that we could hold that middle unit, sell the 2 outside, live in the middle one, debt-free, unencumbered for a period of time, with the long-term view that we would hold that as a long-term investment, the middle property, knowing it would fetch similar rent. Yes, so sold the 2 on the outside, you get the best resale for the 2 on the outside, keep the middle one. Yes, it's worth a little bit less, but you generally get similar rent. But for us, it was a long-term vision to hold that property anyway. But we wanted to go through a season of being able to live in a property unencumbered, no debt, no mortgage, and it just achieved a goal. But it really showed me how you can make it work when you're on the same page. And for me, it's obviously everyone. You've got different decision makers in every relationship, and obviously not everyone listening to this podcast is in a relationship. Some of you might be single or not yet married, or you've been divorced, or you're no longer with your partner, and some people have got kids, some don't. So it's very hard to talk into every demographic. But look, generally a lot of people have some type of relationship that involves a partnership of some sort. So I'll speak into that. If you're on your own, happy days. You don't have to consult with anyone. That's one complexity removed from the scenario. But that idea of taking a step back to take a step forward, it involves obviously a sacrifice. And so for my wife and kids, it meant one of the sacrifices was losing a good-sized backyard for a season. Now, we had to look at it and say it's only a season. It's only a short season in our life, but it's a season that will enable us to make some really good decisions that can set our family up, that can financially help us get into a better position, and hopefully help us more in the long run. So the idea for us was a little bit of short-term pain for some better long-term gain. But there were sacrifices that had to be made. My kids had to make sacrifices. We went from all of them having a bedroom to the two youngest kids in this season of our lives having to share a bedroom. And it's not a third world problem, but like the reality is everyone had to make different sacrifices. We went from having a double garage to like a larger single garage. So there's obviously challenges in that. Then you go from, having your own space, your own backyard, a lot more of your own privacy, to then you're in three, triplexes, side-by-side townhouses pretty much. So there was that element as well. And then, there's all those different things that you factor in. And for us, we moved out of a suburb that we love and we wanted to stay in, wanted to live in. But for this short term, we moved 10, 15 minutes down the road because we understood that for a short-term bit of pain, it's going to give us a long-term financial gain. And I think the key is to obviously you've got to be on the same page with that. I was lucky in the sense that my wife was all in. Mel was all in on that. She understood it. She got it. She could see the long-term vision because we had a plan. And look, not everything goes to plan. We know that. Last week I spoke about problems, dealing with problems. Nothing always goes to plan, and it rarely does. But the reality is if you don't have a plan, generally nothing happens. And you really don't have anything to strive for and to aim at and to head towards. So for us, we developed a plan. Long-term goal was to get into an area where we love. Our youngest kids go to school there. I love playing golf, so it was around the corner from the golf course, close to our main office, only 5 minutes, close to the beach. There was a lot of things that we dreamed of and envisioned, and an area where our two eldest kids could just walk to the train station to jump on a quick train ride to their high school. And obviously for our two younger kids in time, we've got a little dog that loves to walk and then beautiful areas to walk. So we had all these things and we were able to envision and plan and just look out for and strategize what that could look like, how we could achieve that. But, for one way we were able to achieve that was by taking a backward step, like going through a bit of short-term pain to do a project where we could live in a townhouse for a season, and we're still there while we're renovating our house. But the idea was to go through a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain to set ourselves up and give ourselves an opportunity to do that. And I'm seeing more and more of that where people are realising, hey, there's an opportunity here to do something that could really set us up. Like we had this client in a northern suburb of Wollongong in Balgownie, and they had this property, paid a fair decent amount off the house, but the idea was, they had young kids, they wanted to spend a bit more quality time with family, less time having to grind, working, long hours and that type of thing. And so they got a vision of what they wanted to do, where they wanted to do it. They were lucky enough that their property was a beautiful corner site. And, they had this vision of being able to build a brand new dwelling right next to the current house that they were living in, with the idea that they could then move into the new house and sell the older house and clear some debt. Now, this couple was lucky enough that we were able to fit a full-size house. It was actually bigger. The house they were on was a single-story, 3-bedroom, your typical sort of 1950s type suburban house, really nice construction, solid build. Just need a little bit of TLC, but they'd done some renos over time to really improve that house and get it to the point where it was quite livable. So the idea was we were able to get a CDC approval for a standalone detached dwelling, 2-story, double garage, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, good sized little backyard on that property. So literally what they were able to do, because they had a fair bit of equity they'd built up through paying off a reasonable chunk of their mortgage, there was enough for them to borrow to build that property next door. Now, while that property was being built, they were just doing some tidy-ups on the other house, knowing that the plan was to sell that. And the beauty is, because they were living in it, they were just able to do some of those tidy-ups over the course of that build of the other project. And they obviously did a little bit in the lead up to it as well. Nothing major, but just getting new flooring, painting the house inside and outside, tidying up a few things. The kitchen and bathrooms were in good condition anyway because they'd done that over a couple of years. But just getting it to the point where it'll be ready to sell, right to sell, good to go. And they were lucky enough to be able to work it where, as they were getting closer to the completion of the house next door, they were able to start getting the house that they are currently living in, their principal place of residence. They were able to get that to the point where they were able to start to get that on the market and to market that property to get people through, with the idea they could then do basically simultaneously with getting the OC and construction finished, subdivision OC for the new dwelling, that they could literally just move out straight into the new dwelling and the new buyers could move in next door. So it was just, for me, it was just such an amazing outcome to see a couple that property with a mortgage on it, big backyard they weren't really using. The idea was they built the house next door. Now they're completely unencumbered, no mortgage in their 30s. I've spoken about that before. Like, a lot of people will spend 30 plus years paying off a house. And, they could be, this day and age, a lot of couples can't buy a house until they're even 40 these days or even older. Just because it is tricky for younger families and people to get into the market. So even if you're lucky enough to get a mortgage in your late 20s, a lot of these couples are still well into their 50s when they finally pay off the mortgage. And we're seeing this now where couples that are able to take a step back to take a step forward can make these sort of pivots. For some people, it's being able to have long-term dreams of doing developments ongoing. For some people, it's just clearing a mortgage, like this couple. The idea was to do a project, to do a development with the idea just to clear a mortgage. Now, once the mortgage is cleared, they've got the ability to save more cash. They've got equity. They've got, opportunities to do additional things. Or in this couple's case, the idea was to just enjoy the pace of life and enjoy the quality of life with their kids while they were young, and where a lot of couples are having to work long hours, they don't have to do that regardless of whether they worked or not. They've got no mortgage to pay, which is obviously one stressor that a lot of, that they're able to alleviate. So for me, that was just such a game changer, and it's really opened my eyes to this, what I think will be a huge trend in the coming years for older couples downsizing, for young couples wanting to get into the market, or for couples that just or people that just want to lower debt or clear debt. There's so many people in our world now. There's just high levels of stress in people's lives and in people's worlds, and I think there's so many more people that want to get into that space. And the beauty is, when you clear debt, you've got equity. Once you've got equity, you can pivot. You can start to do that, different types of options and opportunities, and step into things that you may not have otherwise been able to step into. And I think the thing I love about this type of strategy, it gives you your first taste of doing a project. It gives you the first taste of being able to pull and execute a project. And I just find that they're quite a nice little project because you're able to really cut your teeth on it. For a lot of people, that they might already have a bit of equity there, so they're able to really push into that space. But like, we had a client recently that they're sort of 4 or 5 years away from being able to do a development. But what they decided was the current property they were living in literally had come to the end of its life in terms of the ability to get any more increase. Yes, they can get a bit more capital growth on it over time, but they wanted to get themselves into a position where they could actually add some value to a future property. So what happened, they were able to source a site and secure a site where they could actually, in time, it was actually within the new LMR in the Shire. And this property, beautiful corner block, and this property, the beauty is for them, they're about 5 years off being able to really execute and pull the trigger, and they've got some goals of the type of how much equity they want to develop in that time. They've been able to chat to a broker, really sort of execute a plan of what they're going to need to be able to pull the trigger on this project in the future. But I just loved the fact that they'd mapped out this vision, understanding that they're not quite there yet, but they will be there. And, too often people look at that and say, 5 years is too long, but 5 years can go in the blink of an eye. I've said this before. I know guys that I've met, years and years ago at different meetup events for developments, and they've still not pulled the trigger on a project. And a lot of it is because there's no plan. You haven't determined how much money you can borrow, how much money you're going to need, or how much equity you're going to need to pull off the trigger on that project. And, this couple, I just commended them. They're a younger couple, but they had the ability to buy this property now, understanding that area is a good area for capital growth. It'll grow in time, in equity, over that period of 5 years anyway, but it gave them a runway of a future project they wanted to do in 5 years' time, knowing that project that they're going to do is not the end point either. That's the point to really set themselves up. But the idea was to own this property, live in it for 5 years as their principal place of residence, be able to really establish some equity in the property, to chew into the mortgage. But in that time, a couple of years into that period of time, the idea was to start to execute an approval on that site with the view, similar to what I mentioned earlier about myself and my wife. For them, the idea is to do the 3 terraces, CDC, sell the 2 outside ones, basically obliterate debt, and by that point, they'll probably not only obliterate debt, but have cash for the future. And the idea is to hold that middle property, and then they can start to look at, okay, what's next? They've got plenty of equity then. They can go and do another project. They might want to cash out of the next project and get their dream house or move into a property, or they might want to do that a couple of times. Like I know some couples that sort of have plans where they go from property to property to property to property. So their end goal is to have a dream house, a beautiful dream house, but they don't want the big mortgage to go with it. So they've developed a development plan of the types of projects they want to do over a period of time to get them to the end goal. So they're going through some short-term pain, living in properties they may not long-term want to live in, but understanding that whilever they're doing this, they're able to really generate some equity base. They're able to generate some wealth and get themselves to a point where they can land in that amazing dream house with no mortgage. Again, it might be a 10-year plan. Now, some people can spend 30, even 40 years paying off that dream house, but paying an enormous mortgage that's overbearing, that's cumbersome, that's all-consuming, and you can spend 30 years of stress, 30 years of hard work and toil and, of that just having to pay that massive mortgage payment. Or you could spend 10 years, have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan of doing some projects where you're able to get yourself in a position where you're not paying large repayments and you're just able to execute from project to project to project to land at that end goal, a lot quicker than you would have got by going through that stressor. And I've just seen more than ever a lot of people that are developing that mindset. It's that not having to keep up with the Joneses, not having to feel like you've arrived, whatever arriving looks like for people, not having to feel like you're behind the eight ball, but to just determine that you develop your plan. Who cares what the person next to you is doing? I look at my own journey. Like, I couldn't give a rip if I'm not currently living in my dream house, because for me, I love property. I love development, but at the same time, I've got an obligation to my wife, to my kids, as well. And like, I'll always love and honour the fact that they let me go through this little period of, and lead them through this little period of time of a little bit of short-term pain. And when we look at pain, like, I went over to Africa with my dad, and it puts in perspective how good we've got it, how lucky we are, how blessed we are in this beautiful country. And you realise our problems are so third world. But at the same time, we are blessed and privileged here, and we want to provide the best for our kids and our families. And, I want to provide the best for my wife. And I think that's a healthy thing. It's not the only thing, and I never want it to be the only thing, but it is something in me that I want to do. But so I'll always honour and love the fact that they let me push into that space to help give us a better future and a stronger future financially. But at the same time, there's an end goal to land in a place where we all want to live, in an area that we all want to live, in a house that we can see our kids grow up in, and we can do that. But we couldn't have done that without some of those initial steps before that. And look, I think the big thing is just keeping your ego in check to go on that journey, because a lot of people don't want to go on that journey. They want to have the big house. They want to show it off. Like, everyone's different. I'm not big on that. I'm not driven by that. I don't care what people think. I've got my lane that I'm driving in. I want to stay in my lane, and I get it. Some people aren't driven that way, and that's fine. But I think if at the same time you got to question, like, why are you driven the opposite way? Why do you have to prove yourself? Why do you have to keep up with the Joneses? Why is it worth your peace of mind to have that ridiculously crazy mortgage and not be able to achieve your vision of projects and developments and generating wealth through property? Is it worth not? Is it worth avoiding going through some of the little short-term pain of, a slightly smaller property, a smaller backyard, all the different things that come with that, but to land at a place where you can, really achieve some incredible things in a short period of time. But there's just something powerful about pulling the trigger on a project. There's something powerful to be said about looking back at something you built, something that you helped make and create, and be able to see a finished product. And, in years to come, you can drive past that suburb, drive past that house, and realise that, hey, that was a part of our story. That was a part of our journey. And, if you got kids like I do, you get to model to them about different ways to generate wealth. You get to model to the next generation, that you don't have to have it all yesterday, that you can work hard, that you can execute things through a different strategy to maybe what a lot of the world will teach you, to go through some short-term pain for some long-term, strategies and gain. And I just think it's a really good system and way of looking. And even if you've done a few developments before, you may just want to decide that, I want to level up in the next couple of years, and I want to really push into that space. And there's I've seen this heaps this year, where I've seen people sell who've even had the dream house unencumbered, and they've just decided, I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to double my value and double my net worth in the next few years, and then just go all in. And for them, it took buy-in from both themselves and their partner, and able to really just go all in. Yes, get a smart strategy, but then it's amazing when you get to see them come out the back end of it, whether it be one or two projects later, and they've literally added sometimes $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million of additional net worth, to their portfolio, and all of a sudden, they could have just sat in that space, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for some people, that you need to press go, and you need to keep active and moving, and then you can do, you've got options and opportunities, and you can do things, whether it be adventures or help your kids, or different different things around the world if you want to help people, or if you want to just be generous. And there's so many things you can do when you've got the ability, you've got funds and capital and resource. And I just think it's an exciting strategy. So look, if you've been listening to this episode and that's something you've sort of been weighing up and toying with, firstly, look at your own property now. Is there any development potential on your site? If there's not, have a look around. Is there the ability to maybe sell your property you've got and to move into another property, knowing that maybe you can put another dwelling on it? Maybe there's an option to put a couple of dwellings on it. Maybe there's an option to split that and subdivide part of it off and carve it off. Or there's so many little things you can do. But just start to envision it, dream it, come up with a plan, develop a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan, and reverse engineer and work backwards from there, and really discover what you want, what you want the next 5 and 10 years to look like and beyond in your life and in your journey. And I think you'll find it'll be quite a exciting planning and vision session to go on. So look, if you've enjoyed this episode, feel free to like, share, subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.